Hey there, Magic players. Barry White here from MagicUntapped.com and Magic Untapped right here on YouTube. Joining me is Carmen Klomparens with Wizards of the Coast, and we're talking about Magic the Gathering Foundations, a brand new set coming out pretty soon, a little later this year. Carmen, kind of give me a little, in a nutshell, about Foundations, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So Foundations is meant to sort of serve as an on-ramp for future new Magic players for the next at least half decade. These are cards that are going to be standard legal for that entire amount of time, and it has, it's actually just a whole product umbrella that is meant to help players get from their first games of Magic all the way to wherever they want to go in the Magic community.
Into whatever format they decide they want to go
Exactly.
into, they can just go right into that.
Yep.
Okay, now, in the past, Wizards of the Coast has tried to make products with that intent. We'll go all the way back to Portal in the 90s, Portal 2, we had Starter 99, Starter 2000. Needless to say, with various levels of success.
Sure.
While yes, it's been a minute since those were current. How does Foundations, that kind of has the same goal, how does it differ from those earlier attempts?
So obviously this is all, or hopefully obviously this is all with some amount of reverence for the ways that we had to learn our lessons and things we had to learn from. I think something that those products got wrong is they treated new Magic players as a separate kind of Magic players and sort of relegated them to the kids' table at Thanksgiving in perpetuity. And Foundations is designed as a sort of roadmap in a lot of ways. So we have the beginner box, which is 10 assorted jumpstart packs. That has a tutorial sequence to help you learn to play your first few games of Magic. Then it has the starter collection, which is about 350 or so cards that let you get your first taste of deck building. You kind of learn how multicolor works. You get a bunch of awesome rares that you can then take to play in events if you want. And then obviously we have a full booster release, which you can draft, and that's gonna be your full Magic set. This is just, it has everything that a real Magic set does, from special guests to booster fun to sick mythics to play at FNM.
So for people who remember those and tried to learn on those earlier attempts, and it felt like diet Magic.
Right.
This is not diet Magic.
No, absolutely not. This is something, we did a panel about it a little while back, and one of the things in the starter collection that I introduced and fought pretty hard for was a card like Maelstrom Pulse. This is something that has had a Pro Tour pedigree in Standard, it had it in Block Constructed, it had it even all the way to Modern, and this is something that's going to be perma-legal in Standard. I always thought it was pretty bad when I worked at an LGS, and someone would buy an intro deck and they'd fall in love with some card out of the intro deck, and you kind of have to pat them on the head and go, okay, well, let me show you what real Magic cards look like, you know?
Yeah.
I really don't want that to be part of the new player experience. This is something where these are cards that, pun somewhat intended, are going to be foundational for Standard Magic for the next few years, and I want Magic players to feel good about the cards that they do fall in love with and feel like they can engage with any of these cards and they're not going to be punished for that.
Now, when Foundations was first announced, it was announced with a few cards, like Llanowar Elf, a very iconic original Magic card, making its way back, and a handful of others. What are some of the other cards, maybe some recently announced ones that people may or may not have caught yet? You already mentioned Maelstrom Pulse, that older players would appreciate, and newer players would be like, wow, this is cool.
So there are a lot of cards that we are kind of trying to hit the thing where we teach a new player what Magic is about. We have a brand new Mythic Rare Niv Mizzet, for example, where it keys off of you casting instants and sorceries and dealing damage with them. It gives you no maximum hand size, draws a bunch of cards. It's something that's somewhat open-ended. It kind of is directional in what kind of deck it wants you to build. So a new player is going to go, oh, cool dragon that I'm supposed to play with spells. But those of us who have played Magic a long time are just like, oh my god, that's Niv Mizzet. And we know that it even goes infinite with itself, with Niv Mizzet per run. Right, exactly. Right. That's very true to Niv Mizzet's character. So it sort of teases that there's more that you can learn about these cards, and it will reward you for investing more time and exploring through whatever search engine that you find cards on, Gather, or what have you. And there are just so many things like that that I think are ideally going to be obviously cool when you first see them, but then also give you cool stuff that you can build on that with.
And you mentioned learn to play, using Foundations obviously as a learn to play vehicle, and there are organizations out there such as Magic Kids that do learn to play, and they partner with for them specifically 3,000 schools, hundreds of thousands of kids nationwide. Is this something Wizards have been talking about using as a vehicle with entities such as Magic Kids and whatnot as a learn-to-play vehicle for kids and newcomers across the country?
Ideally, that's the case. That's something that is really important to a lot of us, because that's how a lot of us started, was having somebody at school who threw a shoebox at us and then said, hey, kid, build something, right?
It didn't throw too hard, I hope.
Well, your mileage may vary, but that's something that we did want to make sure that at least your introductory experiences are something that are going to be friendly to Magic players of all ages, because Magic, at its core, we want it to be for everybody. This is something that's really important to myself and everybody else that worked on it.
Now, is Foundations, while yes being a kind of an onboarding project, is it also being looked at as like the new core set for Magic?
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is, right? It's something where we've tried a bunch of different versions of core sets over the years, and this is one where we really wanted to pull out all the stops and make sure that if we were going to do this, we took a break from doing them for a couple of years. We wanted to do it right. We really didn't want to take anything for granted. We're doing this eternal legality thing where these cards are going to be legal for a long time. We really questioned the premise of every single step of historical core sets and made sure that they were all serving the goals that we wanted them to.
So as far as like a core experience, we've touched upon a few things, such as the learn to play and keeping approachable yet interesting. What are some of the true, like the full period, full stop, the core experience things you hope players will get, experienced or novice, out of Foundations once they get some hands on them and actually get some time playing them?
So something that this set, I hope, does a good job, fingers crossed, of doing is sort of setting expectations for what it is like to play the rest of Magic. This set technically has more mechanics than any other core set we've done before, but they're just all of our deciduous mechanics. Deciduous mechanics are the ones like Landfall and Raid, for example, where these could just show up anywhere.
Plus the evergreens.
Yeah, exactly. The tramples, flyings of the world, of course. We have a ton of stuff in that space. We have food tokens, for example. We have things where we say, okay, you're probably going to need to learn about this in order to engage with Magic. I know in the starter collection, for example, I have cards that are showing different expressions of multicolor. Mystical Teachings is an example of a card where that's not literally a gold card, but you probably want to have blue mana and black mana in your deck to get the most out of it.
Right.
Because even if there isn't anything doing the off-color flashback in Standard right now, who's to say that that will be the case for the next 5 or so years? I want to make sure that whenever someone engages with Foundation, they're then able to go, oh, actually, I really want to try out Duskmourn, and they're not going to be thrown for a loop whenever they see multicolor uncommons, for example.
In the development of this, by the way, looking at releases coming forward, like the Death Race set, for example, how has Foundations been playing with these upcoming sets during playtests? Is it making sure it plays nice with what's coming out in the future? Yeah,
that's something that I'm really glad you brought up, because in Foundations we kind of gave you 3/4 of several decks, and that was to give us the out to have something to amplify that later on. I'm not going to spoil too much about any individual cards or anything like that in very far off sets, but Erebos has a new card. This is a legendary cat creature in Foundations.
One of my wife's favorite commanders, by the way.
It's so cool. It's fun. You fill your deck with cats. Who doesn't love that? But it is a cat lord that triggers whenever more cats enter the battlefield under your control. And so that gave us the out to say, hey, if we want to hook into this later on, we can just give this cat deck a couple of more tools. Maybe if there's something that it's naturally weak to, like sweepers or something, we can try and make an anti-sweeper cats card in a set or something to that effect. We tried to leave our stuff open-ended and directional enough that we as designers could later hook back in and say, hey, those cards from Foundations that you got, you should be thinking about those.
Almost like the set has a built-in to be continued end credits.
Yeah, exactly. And something that so someone else who worked on the set named Ari Zirulnik brought up that I think is a great point is that it teases what's possible in Magic, right? It kind of makes you think about, oh, okay, so I could fill my whole decks with cats, and that's going to reward me, right? That's something that's a given once you've played a lot of Magic, but there are a bunch of different designs that are meant to kind of showcase all the different kinds of decks that you can build.
Okay, well, if there's any one specific thing that the viewers and people who are curious about Foundations should know about, should keep in the back of their minds as we approach the release date, what do you want to make sure they know going into that?
I guess the big thing is that I think it is something that a lot of players think about when they think core set, is they think that it's only for new players, and it's not something that they really need to pay attention to. I cannot stress enough, I think I might sound like a little bit of a broken record at this point, but these are real foundational cards that are going to be a big part of Standard, and this is something that is actually really cool and fun to play with. This is something where even in the office we have been building decks out of Foundations and the like, just because the cards are pretty fun to play with, and for the most part they really can hang. We want players to feel like whenever they engage with this product, they're going to have something that they can play with and bring to FNM for a long time, and they're not going to get laughed out of the room for doing so. So even players like us should probably be paying attention to these cards and maybe trying out some decks.
Right, and you said fun to play with. Magic the Gathering is a game, and games are designed to be fun.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. So in this, as we're approaching the end of the year, this is coming out sooner than later. Remind us the release date.
November 15th, I believe, is the day that this becomes legal.
Okay, so check your local game stores November 15th for Magic the Gathering Foundations. This is Carmen. I'm Barry for Magic Untapped. Thank you very much for joining us. See you next time.